what was given to me 5 years ago is take thou authority to order the church as an elder. Order the church. And it is really difficult to order the church if you don't speak in truth and in love the things that are hard to say.
Yes.
Jesus said the hard things. They thought he was a religious zealot. They thought he was a troublemaker. They thought he was aggressive. They had another thing coming, right? But what he said was, it can be different. And I am here to make it different.
Welcome to She Leads. I'm your host, Thea, and I'm so glad that you joined in today. She Leads is a podcast that creates a space for women to share their experience in leadership, faith, and relationships. And I'm so honored and thrilled that you joined us today for this conversation. I would love to have you participate in the conversation as well. So send in your comments and your feedback to sheleadscomments@gmail.com, and we can invite you into the conversation as well. Today, I have a special guest. Reverend Kimberly Carney is with us today to talk about being a female pastor and a female preacher. Welcome, Kimberly. How do you want to introduce yourself to the podcast?
My name is Reverend Kimberly Carney. I serve as an elder in full connection in the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, currently serving at Fairwood United Methodist Church in Tyler, Texas, which has seen dramatic change in the past 11 months. It has definitely been a whirlwind, and when people ask me how it's going, I ask them if they have a few minutes, and if they don't, I just tell them that it is awesomely overwhelming. In this area, we have been, had a lot going on in the past 11 months. And what's great is that God takes what is going on, and if you are truly faithful to what he wants in your life and his call on your life, he will make it good. Yeah. And so I am excited for what is going on in my local congregation, as well as what is going on in the Texas Annual Conference. And, I think it is an amazing blessing to have this call and this gift to preach and to lead and to hopefully make disciples of Jesus Christ to transform the world.
Yeah. Amen. Tell me something that we wouldn't find on your bio. What would we maybe, or on a resume, something fun, something interesting that you don't usually share, maybe in a professional introduction?
Yes. So I was actually the sub-junior ESPN skeet shooting champion.
What?
At the age of 6 and 7. So I grew up shooting black powder muzzle loaders and shotguns when I was younger, and I was a national champion in doing that.
Well,
so most people do not know that about me. Yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
I'm a good shot. So
that's awesome. I did want to share that about a year ago, I mentioned to Kimberly that I wanted to do a podcast. And I believe that being able to speak that out loud, you were probably one of the first people I told. And to speak it out loud sometimes is all we need to kind of get going. And so thanks for listening. Thanks for not saying that was a ridiculous idea. You shouldn't do that. And here we are today. So I'm really glad that this worked out, that you were in town and we got to make this happen. So let's jump in and let's talk about female preaching. Talk to me about your first preaching experience.
So as I was reading over this, you gave me the talking points. I was like, my first preaching experience ever? Or like my first preaching experience is called full-time into the pulpit. So I received my call very early. I was 15 years old. I knew I was headed towards ministry, had no idea what that looked like or where that looked like. And so as the youth group member in 8th grade, I remember being asked to give the homily for youth church, youth service and worship service on Youth Sunday. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, what do I want people to know about this Jesus that I am seeking to follow as a preteen, and this God who I don't know a whole lot about, but I know it's a good thing. Like I know that this God that I love and that I follow is a good thing. And so I remember standing in this pulpit in the sanctuary at Bellevue United Methodist Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and I stood there feeling so small in this big pulpit area. My pastor at the time, I had two. Peter Von Ace was well over 6 feet tall, and Reverend Cherie Parker is not a petite woman either. She's very tall. And I remember standing there literally feeling in the shadow of giants, but feeling comfortable there and feeling called there. And I wish I could tell you what I actually preached on. I cannot remember that far back, but I know that my mother probably has a copy of it in a box somewhere. And that was, of course, but way before, live feeds and things of that nature. But I remember standing there and looking at all of these faces, and every single one of them was like, oh yeah, she's going to do something good. And even now, when I talk to people who were in that congregation on that Sunday and who kind of walked with me and followed me through my journey as a young preteen, as a teenager, as someone in college, they always say, oh, we knew you were called. We knew you were called. We knew you were going to do this. And we knew that you were going to preach the gospel in new and unique ways, and you were going to change this world. And, hearing that now, so many years on the other side of it, just makes me so thankful for a place that kind of nurtured me and allowed me to be my awkward, silly, no-nonsense self, and giving me a place to do that. And for those two pastors, Reverend Peter Von Ace and Reverend Cherie Parker, and even the ones that came after who said, no, absolutely, you do have a place in this pulpit. You do have a place in this world, and you have things that the world needs to hear. And without that support, I don't think I would be where I am today. I would be, doing behavior analysis for Criminal Minds or something like that. I don't know. Who knows? So yeah.
That's amazing. So you said 15 years old. Mm-hmm. Had you shared your testimony or a story? Had you stood up in a church setting and spoke before you actually dared to preach the word?
So kind of. I mean, I was a liturgist. I served as a lay leader. I served as, a person in the church who did prayers and, spoke in, youth group and things of that nature. I always sung in the choir, played in the handbells. I was always very comfortable in front of people in that church setting. But I think everyone would say that at the age of 18, I was a sophomore in high school. That is when it clicked. That is when it changed. That is when I heard the audible call of God on my life, and to be more than a layperson. And not that being a layperson, it's not that clergy are more than lay people at all. It's just that this is what I was called to do. And I never looked back. And I'm so grateful for that, because I hear stories of our colleagues, especially women, who say, that was not an option for me. That was not an option for me for where I grew up. Even if they did grow up in a United Methodist congregation, they had to, do everything else but be a full-time pastor, because they were not, in their world, that was not a reality. And so I realized how gifted I was with that, how blessed I was, and really how privileged I am to be a person to say, I never looked back. And I doubted, but I never looked back. Never looked back.
So fast forward, it sounds like that was an amazing experience. So much support and encouragement, and that just kind of continued. Fast forward to today, where you are the senior pastor at Fairview United Methodist in Tyler. What is it? What are your experiences as a female preacher today?
So, it's funny. I was actually sharing with I think maybe it was you earlier today, that I am of a generation that is very new in the United Methodist Church. I have never worked at, or been appointed to a church where a female had not been present before. And that's very, very rare, especially in East Texas and in these places. So being a pastor, I being young, I always worked with women pastors. And so I had great role models. I had somewhere I would do things differently, but I learned something from every one of them. So in East Texas, I was appointed in Huntsville, Texas for the past 7 years, and I'm not a Texas native. And I thought that was East Texas, and my mind was blown when I went behind the pine curtain and, to East Texas, and realized that this really is another world. And everything is different there. The world moves a little bit slower there. And so it's been interesting, not so much in the congregation, because the congregation is solidly United Methodist, and they've had a female pastor before, and me stepping in, they were like, okay, yep, we've seen a female in the pulpit before. That's not strange to us. But in the community is really where it has been an eye-opening experience. It's interesting that in 2023, 10 years into this, people still look at me and say, oh, like what kind of pastor? Or, oh, what do you do? Just sit around and read your Bible all day? And it's interesting when I walk people through what a week looks like, or sometimes I will, pull out my calendar and I'll say, well, let me show you what I did this week. And it's interesting when they say things like, oh, so you're like an office manager / project manager / CEO, and you're in charge of doing tending to the spiritual welfare of people's lives. And my particular congregation is incredible, very accepting, very loving. It's interesting being in a place where you walk out on Sunday morning and people comment about the words you've said and the sermon that you've given, and not on your haircut or your makeup or what you're wearing. And for people who feel like that might be trivial, I spend 20 to 30 hours a week on my sermon every week. 20 to 30 hours putting together, memorizing, because I do not use notes, and practicing putting forth a message that educates, empowers, and encourages people, that tells the truth in a way that is thought-provoking and maybe possibly provocative, but doing it with love through the lens of a Savior who died for us and gave us the map work of how to make disciples. And it's really nice when someone says, that was a really great sermon, and I was still thinking about it a few days later. And, and not that it's not nice to get a compliment on a haircut or the way you've styled your clothing, but, it kind of takes the wind out of your sails when you think, were you just looking at my new earrings as I said all that? So again, I recognize that I am in a place, in an appointment that is very privileged. It was not always that case in my previous appointments. I had people say things to me like, you really shouldn't wear that in the pulpit. It's distracting. Or, maybe you shouldn't, be so grandiose and outspoken and move your hands around and, your facial expressions and those kinds of things. Those kinds of things do take a toll after a while.
I remember I had someone tell me, it was a good sermon. It was really female, but it was good. And I thought, what else did you expect? I didn't have enough sports analogies for you, and I just thought of her being very like, that's an interesting way. And you also had to put, but it was good, as if those would have been mutually exclusive. And what I've learned is most people have great intentions. They do like your haircut. They do like your shoes. They do think you look pretty today, and maybe don't have the words or the comfort to actually even maybe one list of them necessarily provide authentic feedback. And so they're trying to connect with you in that way, but also not recognizing how some things that they say are just can be ridiculous.
Yeah,
too.
it's interesting because I had this conversation with actually an SPRC member at one of my previous.
What's an SPRC?
Points. Oh, so the SPRC is the HR committee of the United Methodist Church. So these are people that you meet with who help guide you, who help do things like decide whether or not you get a raise, and what is your job performance review at the end of the year, and how can they support you and advocate for you, and they fire and they hire, really. And those people have really hard jobs. Absolutely. And I remember I was speaking to my group at one point, and I was telling them, these are some of the things that bug me, that bother me. And if you guys could help set the example of maybe not saying those things at the end of a service, or when people do say them, maybe redirect the conversation and saying, yeah, but what about that analogy she gave for, whatever during her sermon, or she did a great job leading that meeting, or, whatever it is. And they were like, well, why does it bother you? Why is it so bothersome? That on a Sunday morning, somebody says to you, oh, you look really cute today, or you look really pretty today, or your haircut looks great. And what I told them was, you are a principal of a school. One of these members was a principal of a school. Another one was a lawyer. She worked for the DA's office. And another one, worked in the prison for TDCJ in the prison system, and was a high-ranking manager. And I said, what if you were giving a presentation to the school board, or to the bar association, or to your, managing the people you manage or something, and at the end of it, they looked at her and they looked at you and they said, wow, your hair looks really great today, principal, whatever. Or, wow, your shoes were really distracting today. Or, wow, your eye makeup looks incredible. How would that make you feel after, in front of your peers, trying to teach somebody or lead somebody after you put all this work into something? That was their only reaction. Yeah. And it was like it clicked for them. It clicked for them. And it's a hard place to be, and it takes a special person to be able to bring that to their attention and to be able to kind of flip it and say, no, wait just a second. Like, if one of the parents of your children, that you teach and that you have taught, and you are trying to tell them about their child and how they're doing and how they can be better and how you can advocate for them and help them, and all they did was look at you and say, you look so pretty. Yeah. And you have to just remember that, yes, I enjoy cute shoes. I enjoy doing my hair different ways. I enjoy wearing big earrings and things like that. But there's so much more to me than that. Yeah. There's so much more to me than that. And you would never say that. You would never say to a male pastor, your suit is very flattering today. And so it's just modeling that and getting people to see that.
I love how your response is that directness, right? Is that you're speaking these truths, you're bringing them out, you're saying, hey, and you're actually being a very good preacher by saying, let me give you a real life illustration so that you can understand this, right? I think, and that's something too that is probably something that drew me to you and drew our connection. Like you're direct, you're honest, you're bold, you say it, and you're not afraid of it. And that's something also as women, we can tend to be really afraid to speak up and to use our voice to say, this isn't okay. That's what I say when people, give me a physical compliment. That's not what I was going for today.
Yep.
It's not what I was going for today. Yes, I did put on makeup and I flattened my hair and I attempted to, look professional and presentable, but I'm not here as a visual.
Right. Exactly. It's funny because I think sometimes as females, especially females in a leadership position, even more so females in a leadership position that even still today are reserved for males, especially up in East Texas where I am and other parts of the world. I think we're scared to be direct. We're scared to be kind of just say, hey, I just need to tell you this, because there is a reputation of women who have spoken directly and haven't been heard. It can easily turn into you're the angry female, or you have a chip on your shoulder, or you are trying to prove a point. No, I'm not trying to prove a point, and I'm definitely not being aggressive because you haven't seen aggressive. I am asserting myself, and if part of the vow that was given to you last night when you got ordained, congratulations, by the way, and what was given to me 5 years ago is take thou authority to order the church as an elder, order the church. And it is really difficult to order the church if you don't speak in truth and in love the things that are hard to say.
Yes.
Jesus said the hard things. They thought he was a religious zealot. They thought he was a troublemaker. They thought he was aggressive. They had another thing coming, right? But what he said was, it can be different. And I am here to make it different and to show you how it can be different. But that means we have to be able to communicate to one another. And because I love you enough to keep you in my life, you need to hear this from me. And if you love me enough, it doesn't mean it's not going to take you back. It doesn't mean it's not going to make you think. It doesn't mean it may not make you feel bad, but it means you're willing to listen to me because you care about me.
Yes.
And, I have tempered and softened the way I say things, as years have gone on. But I also realized that in order for me to do what I was ordained to do, which was take thou authority and order the church, and in ordering the church, I'm able to give a great word through sermon and do sacraments and baptism and keep justice and love mercy and walk humbly and all those things that we do as pastors and as female leaders. I have to do it in a way that I don't regret doing it. And for me, being direct, saying it, doing it with love, making them understand it in their context, helps me be a better pastor because it helps them come alongside me. Yeah. And I need those people alongside me to help me do what God has called me to do, because we cannot do it alone.
Yeah, that's something I struggle with, especially in rooms mostly male, that I feel like there's an expectation that if I do bring something else up, I have to be nice about it. I have to be sweet and cuddly and kind of taper it in, or even sometimes just soften of, well, maybe we could. What if, instead of like what we need to do. And so there's something that I've been trying to do is to stop adding all these precursor words before I say what I really want to say, and just say what I want to say. And however the other people in the room feel about it, it's really not my responsibility. It's really not my business, and just to and to speak that truth and to say, this is on my heart. And guess what? We don't have to do it. We don't all have to agree it's a good idea. And even saying that, like, hey, can we agree that we don't all have to agree in this room, and that we can say what we're feeling, we can say what we're thinking, we can offer up these ideas and be willing to talk about it with one another and not get our feelings hurt, and that none of us feel like we have to walk on it. Let's just all be direct and honest.
Right. Absolutely.
So we can actually get somewhere.
Absolutely. And I think that what we forget is that we are so scared to hurt people that we do end up hurting people.
Yes.
You're in a room with a lot of males, and they could learn that they do see you as an equal. They do want to support you, but because women are afraid to tell them how to best support us, sometimes the best way to support us is to be quiet and let us speak for ourselves and back us up on it. That's the best way. Don't have us say something and then say, well, maybe she. No. Say, what did you hear her say? If she needs to clarify it, ask her. Ask her. Say, what did you mean when you said that? Yes. Don't undercut us, And sometimes I use humor as a way to kind of soften that, because I do know that my tone can be very, to the point. But there comes a time, and most men in my life know that if I get pushed to a point and my tone changes a certain way, they need to be quiet and back off, because I'm going to handle that situation. And I can handle that situation. Yeah. And we
were talking earlier, I this idea, like, I don't need the men in the room to take care of me. And if we're being honest, most men in my life have failed in that role, so I have no trust. Yeah. And so, like, you can just be in the room and let's figure it out together. I don't need you to solve my problems, offer your advice, and that kind of stuff. Let's talk about what is God doing for you new? Where is God leading you new in life, and what fruit are you hoping for?
So in my current context, which is a word we like to use, where are you now? Explain to me your context, which is basically a fancy $5 word for saying, where are you serving? Tell me about your day-to-day life in your church, right? Yeah. My church is very different than Thea's church, which is very different than any other church, because they're all unique, right? Currently, my church has seen a lot of growth very quickly, very suddenly, but it's people who have experienced, many of them, a deep, deep hurt, a deep, deep place of they feel like their pastor and their church that they have loved for a very long time has turned their back on them and has told them in many ways through their actions and even through actual words, like, I understand that's how you feel, but we're going in a different direction. You can either come with us and keep your mouth shut or go with God's love, you know? And that's a hard thing to hear from a place that you have literally given your heart and soul to for a long time. So currently at Fairwood, I am preaching and I am saying the things that a lot of people have never heard a pastor say. I'm saying it from the pulpit. I'm saying it on record. It is going out on the internet, and I am willing to take whatever backlash comes from that, and whatever those consequences are, I am willing to meet them headway. And I ask people and I tell people, you know, if you have a question or a concern, because usually that concern is just a question that needs clarifying, or it is, I've never been allowed to consider that.
Yeah.
I've never had a safe place to consider that. How do I, navigate that? Come to me, ask me, be direct, and let's have a conversation about it. One of them happened to be, it was the Sunday after Easter, and typically the Sunday after Easter, pastors preach, the doubting Thomas. Like the disciples are in the upper room, they're exhausted, they're exhausted, they're frightened, they are literally scared to death. They have scattered and they have come back, and now there's this rumor that Jesus is back. They saw him die on the cross, they saw him get put in the tomb, and that tomb is empty and Jesus is back. And what do they do with that, right? So they are frightened and they're scared, and Jesus reveals himself to the disciples, and Thomas says, I don't know about that. Which, if we're being honest, that's what we would probably say too, if we were in that situation. And there was a line this year in the text that I read, in the version of the Bible, the translation that I used, and it said, Jesus is saying that the purpose of my words are such, are to show the love of God and to show that there is a new day coming. That is the purpose of his words. And so I use that in saying, okay, if this is all the words of Jesus, if the New Testament is based upon these gospels that are the words of Jesus, and by the way, there are more than just 4 gospels. These are just the 4 that made the cut because they told the story that the people putting it together wanted told. But, the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of Judas and the Gospel of all these different people who were eyewitnesses to who Jesus Christ was. The purpose of all of those words are not to browbeat somebody and scare them into believing in a Christ that they have not yet been shown. That is not the purpose of this book. The purpose of these words in this book as a whole is to tell us who we are as God's people, is to tell us how we live as God's people, and finally to tell us how we love as God's people. And if we are not doing that with this book, then what are we doing? And at the end of that sermon where, I told that and I said, these are Bibles that have sat on our shelves, that have been thrown in the back of our cars, that are given away for free at, in hotels and by the Gideons and all these people. But until you really read it and you consider that this book, this actual physical book, was put together, inspired by God, put together by men, many, many years ago, to say something that they wanted to say, cannot be used to hurt people. And when we start using the words of Jesus to harm people, that is when we stop being the people of Jesus. And afterwards, I had so many people come up to me and say, thank you for saying what we have been thinking for so long. And thank you for saying, from a place of authority, from a place of being a pastor, and telling us what it means to be the people of Jesus, and that might not look like what we were always shown. Because somewhere down the line, it stopped working. It stopped working. And so for me, I feel like part of my place is to say those provocative things in a place where they were told not to say them. Because if I'm thinking them, I know other people are thinking them. And being a place for people to question and being a place for people to consider. And in that questioning and considering, making people realize, okay, wait, I see it a little differently and I can understand where they're coming from, but it looks like we're trying to do the same thing. Yeah. We're doing the exact same thing.
Awesome. So what we like to close each week with, what step can a leader take? So if there's a woman out there who's got something to say, and maybe it's not soft and beautiful and always so invited, what's the one step piece of advice you'd give a woman who has got a voice and yet maybe struggling to use it?
Find another female. Find another female, a coach, find a mentor, find a friend, find a pen pal, find someone who you trust that when you tell her that, she says, how can I support you in that? Yeah. How can I support you in that? And if the first words out of her mouth aren't, how can I support you in that? Or that's incredible, tell me more about that. There are other women out there that you can talk to. There are other women out there. I'm one of those women. I will give it, click on the link or whatever's below this podcast. Like I am one of those women. And how can we support each other? Because the days of fighting one another to be the one at the top are over. We now have to show the world that we cannot be our own worst enemy. We can't. There is room for all of us at where we need to be.
Yes.
There's room. God would not have created this many of us if there were not room for all of us. I know that for a fact.
I love it. Thank you so much. If people want to reach out, if they've got questions, concerns, they want to follow you, they want to hear some of your provocative preaching, where can they find you?
So we are on Facebook at fairwoodumctyler.com. And then we are also on Facebook at Fairwood UMC Tyler. And so you can find us there. We are live streamed every Sunday. And then hopefully you spoke it into existence a year ago. I'm going to speak it into existence. Maybe this time next year I'll have a blog or a vlog or something, some kind of tidbit or something that you can find me on too. But if not, you can look up my church, Google my church, Fairwood United Methodist Church in Tyler. Call us, contact us, email us, whatever. Come, walk in the door, whatever it is. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you.
Show up and build community.
Yes.
Thank you again for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Again, I'd love to continue the conversation. Send your comments to sheleadscomments@gmail.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. She Leads is produced by me, Thea Curry-Fuson, recorded and edited by Pearland Podcast Studios. All thoughts and expressions shared by the guest are theirs and not the organizations they're affiliated with. Thanks for tuning in. Check us out next week to continue the conversation on She Leads.